In a dim corner of the old intelligence building's archive, among dust-covered shelves and forgotten reports, Nader, a retired employee, was lazily flipping through files, preparing to complete his final task before being officially sent into retirement. His mission was simple: sort through what was worth preserving and discard what time had rendered obsolete. But he never expected to come across that gray file, strange and out of place, bearing no number or date. Only a single handwritten word etched across the cover: 0. The word pulled him in. There was something unsettling about it, as if it wasn't the name of a file, but a symbol of something far greater. He opened the worn cover, and his eyes began devouring the first few lines. Unfamiliar names, encrypted codes, geographic coordinates, and surveillance reports dating back over 40 years. But what truly caught his attention were the signatures of high-level officials and commands that abruptly ended without explanation. Nader felt the air in the room grow heavier, as if the document carried a secret never meant to be read. He hesitated, but curiosity outweighed caution. He knew he was supposed to hand over the file, but something deep inside compelled him to pick up his phone and call only one person: Officer Marwan, known within the agency by the nickname the Ghost Hunter. Marwan arrived in less than an hour. The moment his eyes fell on the cover, his face changed color. In a hushed voice, he said, "The 0 file? I thought that was just an old myth passed around by the veterans." Then he added, "If this is what I think it is, someone will do anything to keep it buried." And in that moment, it was no longer just a file. It had become a mystery, one that unlocked the gates of shadows, where secrets do not die. They simply wait to be awakened.
The security office in the basement buzzed with the sounds of scanning and analysis machines as the first interrogation sessions regarding File 0 began. Officer Marwan sat before a large screen displaying images of the documents, flipping through them carefully, trying to piece together the chronological sequence of the mysterious events. On one of the pages, he found a reference to Operation Kryptos, an operation not mentioned in any previous record, not in the archives nor in national security files. He summoned Dima, an analyst specialized in ancient ciphers, and asked her in a dry tone, "Have you seen these symbols before?" After a few moments of scrutiny, she replied, "These aren't just symbols. This is a pattern of double encryption used by foreign agencies in the 1960s, but modified in a distinctly local way." The tension in the room intensified. This meant the file might be linked to a high-level internal espionage operation. Marwan began cross-referencing old names with their current positions and discovered that one of them now holds an influential post in a sovereign institution. At that moment, reports came in that a man had attempted to breach the building's archive the night before, using an old ID card that belonged to an officer who had been dead for 20 years. It became clear that opening the file had stirred something dormant, or rather, awakened someone who was never meant to be disturbed. In a private session with the Director General, Marwan was asked, "Are we facing an external threat or an internal one?" He replied in a composed tone, "We're not certain yet, but if our suspicions are correct, the enemy is among us, and at least 2 steps ahead." As the tangled threads of the investigation multiplied, doubt began to creep into the team itself. Marwan no longer trusted the familiar faces he saw every day. Even the secretary who brought his coffee was now under surveillance. In a closed session, Marwan instructed Dima to sever the connection between the internal system and external databases. "We're looking for a traitor, and he might be among us," he said, his gaze scanning everyone in the room without exception.
An internal report arrived stating that a page from File 0 had been removed and photographed without official authorization. Who had the clearance? Only 5 individuals, all from the upper security circle. Interrogations began, not before external investigators, but among colleagues themselves. Suspicious glances, evasive answers, nervous gestures, all revealed that everyone was hiding something. Marwan scrutinized the tiniest details, entry logs, tone of voice, even posture. Everything became a potential clue in a game without mercy. One night he received an anonymous message on his phone. "Not all secrets are protected. Some are reburied." He told no one about the message, but began recording all his conversations, even with his closest aides. Dima, too, began to grow suspicious, haunted by a question she dared not ask. What if Marwan himself is hiding something? In this tense atmosphere, everyone became a suspect, and everyone became an investigator. The phase of doubt wasn't just a moment, it was the beginning of the unraveling of trust in an institution built on secrecy.
As pressures mounted and the mystery deepened, the investigation entered a phase where actions were no longer calculated, they were fraught with danger. Orders were now executed without official documentation, and meetings were held in unusual locations, far from recording devices and watchful eyes. Shadow teams were mobilized, teams whose members didn't even know each other. Each carried only part of the picture, and none had the full view. Encrypted messages began to appear from nowhere on office printers across different departments, all signed with the mysterious initials NS. No one knew who NS was, but everyone who ignored the messages experienced a strange security incident the very next day. Old files, sealed for over 20 years, were reopened, forgotten names resurfaced, now bearing an ominous weight. Behind the scenes, internal and external factions began pulling the strings, some aiming to bury the truth, others hoping to ignite a crisis. The media caught faint whispers and began hinting at an impending earthquake within the intelligence community. In response, attempts at media blackout began, alongside paid narratives meant to steer attention elsewhere. Beyond national borders, foreign intelligence agencies took sudden interest in the file, and suspicious leaks began to surface. In this charged atmosphere, Marwan started moving in an unmarked vehicle, dressed in civilian clothes, changing his phone every 2 days. The operation had grown beyond him. He felt the game had shifted from an investigation into a battlefield of political influence. Authorities quietly reassigned powers, some personnel were transferred without explanation, and 2 analysts disappeared without a trace. None of these movements were random. They were calculated steps in a chess match only visible in the shadows. And with every escalation, the truth became more fragile, and the threat closer than anyone imagined.
On a morning unlike any other, the team gathered in the gray room, where silence preceded the storm. Sealed files with red wax stamps were placed on the table. Such files are opened only when immunity falls. Tense eyes, heavy breaths, and some hands trembling over the papers. Marwan opened the first file and said clearly, "This is where the truth begins, or the lies end." Photos appeared, audio recordings, and financial transfers through shell companies. Doubt was no longer an option. Some faces changed instantly, as if the mask had fallen before being torn off. One tried to deny, but the recording shown moments later was enough to silence any defense. Those who were allies yesterday became suspects today, and those who smiled in corners shrank into cold silence. The door was firmly closed. No one would leave before the game was revealed. In the corner of the room, Dima sat, silently, taking notes, knowing some answers were yet unwritten. One individual confessed,
Another fainted, as if the truth was too heavy to bear. Confessions began to pour in, but not all were expected. Some named people never mentioned before. Marwan laughed bitterly and said, "The enemy was not outside the walls. He was sitting on the chair beside us." Identities changed within minutes, loyalties exposed under the harsh light. There was no escape. Badges were removed, clearances withdrawn, bank accounts frozen. The era of shadows ended, and the era of reckoning began. For the first time since the start, no one spoke of possibilities, only of facts. In that room, not only did the masks fall, but decades of trust crumbled.
When everything calmed down, only silence remained, a silence resembling the edges of a void. The ending was neither glorious nor just, but more like a stone falling into a bottomless well. All the efforts, investigations, and long nights ended in a great zero, shining like mockery. As if the story was never told, as if the truth was never spoken, as if the heroes were mere illusions that do not dwell in memory. The mark of zero is not an absence, but an overwhelming presence of unforgettable disappointment. It is that feeling that you gave everything, and in return, got nothing. The offices were emptied, the files archived, and souls exhausted from trying to understand. Even the looks exchanged between team members were no longer the same. Something inside them had broken. Hope was their fuel, and when it ran out, nothingness became the fuel for silence. In their minds, the question still buzzed. Were we right, or just pawns in a bigger game? Who planned, who covered up, and who turned the truth into a legal illusion? Every thread vanished, but memory still refuses to fold away. Marwan no longer reviewed the evidence. He reviewed himself. Every step became a burden of doubt. Every certainty became a new question. And time, it did not erase the mark of zero, but rather fixed it as an unforgettable truth. Thus, no heroic ending, nor a story proudly told, but an arc that ends at a hidden point. A point resembling zero, no beginning after it, no end before it. A mark that leaves you wondering, what if we never started at all? What if the beginning was a deception? But the deepest mark is the realization that some battles are fought only to know your true weight. And their weight now is zero.